This is River, he,
Oh,
him, and he's an atheist, and he's asking how to ask questions about God to his friends without looking like an asshole. So this is a great question and something that I think a lot of people out there in general should be asking themselves. And that's where I come from. River, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Again.
Tell us a little bit about your question.
So like every time I go to school or in public, these people talk about the Trinity and how God is all great. And I just want to ask like a question to them, like, if I don't believe in God, why should I burn in hell for all eternity because I don't believe in one thing? Like, that doesn't really make sense.
Hmm. And you want to be able to ask these kinds of questions without like putting people off, like because you're worried of coming across as harsh.
Yeah, yeah.
Paul, you take the lead on this one. I've taken the lead on the
so
past.
I think, I mean, the question you ask is obviously a great one, right? If there's a all loving God, then
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff doesn't follow. So, but not everyone believes in an all loving God. I've come to learn, having left a very narrow version of Christianity, that there are many flavors of theism, and so coming in assuming what they believe is often harsh. In fact, they may just laugh at you. For example, they may believe that hell is just psychological torment and no torture at all. So they will just dismiss you as being ignorant about Christianity because you didn't adhere to their very narrow sliver of it. So I think in these conversations, what I prefer to do is to ask them what they believe and why, which is ironically kind of the motto of this channel. What do you believe and why? And then sort of the probing, well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Tends to make them be a little bit more self-reflective about their answers. Well, for example, just, that there is a God. Well, hello, my friend Jim. What makes you think that, what makes you think, Jim, that there's a God? And well, how did you know that that's a real experience versus something just in your head? And letting them answer questions instead of, I know you want to ask questions, but if your questions are specifically leading them to do the talking as opposed to being accused of something, is just going to be a natural conversation flow. That's always just going to help the conversation go better because people love to talk about themselves. That's just the thing.
Hmm.
And as I'm doing right now, he gave me a chance and I went for it. But so I guess I would encourage, rather than pitching a doctrine that you think Christianity means and asking them to defend it, let them be the seller, and in more of a street epistemology, even kind of a way, like, why, what makes you think that's true? And if it's faith, well, it's like, well, can faith be just, can that same kind of faith be applied to a different situation and come to an opposite conclusion using the same kind of method? Like, those are the ones that actually end up changing people's minds and hearts. Unless what you want to do is just pugilistically fight with people. If that's your goal, if you just want to fight with your friends, by all means. But if you're hoping to change some minds, perhaps something more in the flavor of what I've, does that make any sense?
Yeah, and like would like taking it slow help too?
Oh, for sure. Start Absolutely start slow. Yeah, jumping straight to hell is, that you're going right to 11 right off the bat. You really start with, what makes you think that there's a God, and what do you think that you know about that God? Like, if they think that the God is all knowing, well, what makes them think it's all knowing, or what makes them think it's all loving? And does that jive with the evidence that we see? We both have puppies that are going crazy. Anyway.
I know. I'm sure you guys can hear mine. She came in
Mhm.
because it's their time to eat, so she's pestering. But yeah, I think just to reiterate, I don't have much to add there. And kind of doing Paul's thing here. I'm just saying, me too, right? Like I think absolutely asking them questions and letting them kind of state their case before you go in and you're like, "Well, this is what I disagree with and this is why." It turns it into a conversation instead of a chastisement, which I think is the problem a lot of people kind of the pitfall that a lot of people fall into, where it's like it starts to feel more like an interrogation instead of a conversation. And when people think they're getting interrogated, they shut down. and they get defensive, and then it goes from being what could be a cool and hallucinating conversation to being a fight. And if you want to fight, you can do it really quickly with you can turn it into a fight really fast. It's not hard to turn it into a fight. But I think a lot of people tend to be more receptive as well when they feel like they can have a conversation with you that doesn't make them feel like they're being judged, right? So coming at it from a curious perspective rather than again a chastising one, I found is pretty helpful. And the easiest way to do that is to ask them questions about where they're coming from and wait for them to say, what do you think? Right. Or if they don't offer that, say, that's interesting. My perspective is XYZ, but, and then ask them another question. And very
Or
quickly, the right
yeah,
people you get a conversation.
or let them or give them space. Like if they come to a place where you can feel that well they're unsure and they you know you can say, hey, well, you know what, this was great. Why don't you go home and think about it for a week, or let's talk about this tomorrow so that they can actually go and do some of their own research and give them some of that chance. And probably the same strategy if they start to keep changing their mind, if they keep shifting the topic, like, well, let's talk about abortion for 5 seconds and then let's talk about something else for 5 seconds. If they're jumping all around when they're feeling trapped, feel free to gently go, well, okay, those are super important things to talk about, but we didn't really finish this one topic. And if you're feeling uncomfortable about it, let's just come back tomorrow. Some
Yeah,
thoughts.
the way that I got into talking about creationism in the first place, like online in an online forum, was because I had a coworker who was a very vocal young creationist. And it got to the point where like he was bringing that up at work so often that finally I was like, man, like, do you think like why what makes you think that, right? Like, where are you coming from with that? Or where are you getting that from? And, the conversation obviously is happening at work. So we decided we'd get coffee and discuss it over coffee. And it turned into a monthly engagement where like we would get coffee. And gosh, that was such a wonderful experience for me because it was also a great learning experience on my part because I realized a lot of the questions that he had, I knew the answer, but I didn't know why the answer was so robust, right? Like I know, how do you know the answer there? Well, radiometric dating, but like why can we trust that? So you'll find that if you have these conversations with your friends, you'll learn a lot about yourself and you'll really flesh out a lot of your own positions in a way that is always going to be worthwhile. Was that helpful?
Mhm. Yeah, that was really helpful. And another question I have is like, how do I come out as an atheist? Because like when I was born in this town, I was raised Christian, and like when I was 6, I started thinking about like the Big Bang and like, wait, have we ever seen God? Like I started thinking about like that kind of stuff, and I stopped believing it real quick. And I never really came out to like my parents or any of my friends at school or anything like that. So like, how do I come out as an atheist?
So the first question is, because sorry, it's a little big. Are you still financially dependent on your parents?
Yeah,
Okay, so then the question needs to be: you need to think about how might they react, and is it worth coming out right now, potentially, because because you're financially dependent on them. If do you have a sense that they would react poorly or well?
very poorly.
Okay. If you're testing the waters, what I typically recommend to someone in this situation, I don't know how many years you have left that you gotta be with your parents, but if you want to test, you should keep testing the waters on very fringe doctrines that are that they hold but are not core to their beliefs. So, for example, just the nature of angels or the nature of demons. And if you want to bring up, I'm not sure that the way our pastor talks about angels is the way I think about angels. What do you think, mom? And mom, will like, what if you can kind of do some of that test of, well, if I'm going to disagree on some minor point, are they still going to accept me? Are they still going to be okay? You can, and if you start broaching up a number of those topics, especially if as they relate to what happened at church, if you're going to church with them, I'm not sure if you are. Some of those they may eventually figure out. Oh, River is doubting, or that they can. But rather than going for the big A atheist sit down conversation, that isn't if it's important to you to be honest in that way, that is one way to do it. But I think you should test the waters if you're still financially dependent and get some affirmation that you're not gonna end up on the street if you make a big one. The other way to tolerate these years that you have left of being there is to basically consider it a research project, as you sounds like you already have been. Like you keep going to church with them so that you can be really well versed in what the opposite is saying. I know it's tough. I know it's unfair that we live in a world where anyone, for any reason, has to live in a way that isn't true to themselves. That sucks. But as as much as I hate it because I didn't control my own coming out story. Someone outed me and it was bad, went very badly. Just do some testing before you put yourselves in really significant harm's way on something that could maybe wait. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, that was helpful too. Thank you guys. Thank
I,
you guys so
no
much
worries.
too. Opened me up on all these topics and like how to approach it. Thank you.
Curious about it, you know? I mean, it's such a wonderful characteristic to have, to be curious about, how to I mean, gosh, you got your whole life out of you. You're already thinking about like, well, how do I broach these topics with my friends and family? Like, gosh, that's you're set up pretty well. But
Way ahead of
that's all
where I
said and
was for sure.
oh yeah, same. Same.
And with the line, we're there's a show on almost every day. So if there's something niggling in your brain and there's no one you can trust, to talk about it honestly. Hey, give us a call.
Please do. Yeah, this is a meant to be a supportive community, right? So if you can find the community that you're looking for, like IRL, one of the best things the internet is that you can find it somewhere. And we're always here to field any questions that we can. You still there, River?
Oh,
River, are you still there? Did we lose River? We might have
we
lost
lost
River.
River, but
We lost.
I wish him well.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right. Gosh, that's kind of a heavy one. It really
Mm,
sucks to have to get that kind of advice. You know, I
does.
I I think you're completely right. I'm glad you said that because it's easy, especially at that age, to feel like, well, I should be able to express myself and how I feel. And you should be
Yes.
able to do that. But the world that we live in, unfortunately, is sometimes not kind to that. And until if you are financially dependent on people, then it sucks. But like you have to keep your own best interests in mind for as long as you can so that you can do the most with what you have later. So I think that's phenomenal advice.